This is Kyle Madsen with your top stories on Sports 1140. The Sacramento Kings are back in action tonight at home against the Atlanta Hawks. Our coverage here on Sports 1140 begins with game night at 5:30. Kings Live is at 6:30, and tip-off with the G-Man is set for 7 o'clock. Anthony Davis' trade request hasn't led to a trade yet, but it did garner a $50,000 fine from the NBA for making a public trade request. That $50,000 is the maximum fine allowed by the CBA. The NBA called it, quote, an intentional effort to undermine the contractual relationship between Davis and the Pelicans. Speaking of the Pelicans, they beat the Rockets last night 121-116. James Harden had 37 points to extend his streak of 30-point games to 24. The Cavs beat the Wizards 116-113. The Bucks topped the Pistons 115-105. It was Thunder 126, Magic 117 in Orlando. D'Angelo Russell had 30 points to lead the shorthanded Nets past the Bulls 122-117. Spurs 126, Suns 124, and the 76ers thumped the Lakers 121-105. It's 8:03. Plan now to watch the big game at Sammy's Restaurant, the best food and drink inside Stone's Gambling Hall, I-80 at Antelope Road. Those are your top stories, and now back to the drive on Sports 1140 KHTK.
Rise and shine, sleepyhead.
I'm not letting you go to work today.
Wait, what?
Everybody, listen up.
Welcome to The Drive.
Morning, morning, morning.
You're gonna talk.
Get on the phone at 339-1140.
Pretty awesome, huh?
Jump in on our text line at 441140.
Everyone is talking about it. You must know that.
The Drive starts now.
Final hour of The Drive. Thanks to Cam DeSilva of Ramswire for joining us. We've got a special final hour planned for you. Told you about this yesterday. Big news happening in Sacramento, and with the prospects of Major League Soccer coming here. Of course, I was on vacation when it happened, because that's exactly what happens whenever I go on vacation. Big things tend to happen. And the guy in the center of it all, sitting across from me right now, you can click your little on button right there. I think that works. Kevin Nagle joining us in studio.
Hey, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. How are you? Let me get that thing right in your face.
Well, you should be feeling pretty good, Dave. I think you took a vacation. That is, just as you said, that seems to be the norm.
Yeah.
You know, you'll never hear news broken by Carmichael Dave, because he's somewhere off in the Pacific,
right,
or someplace, down in Tulum, Mexico.
I was in the middle of nowhere, and I've got the rickety old internet package, and I'm trying to talk to you guys and flipping on Twitter, and all the news breaks. And
well, somebody said to me, they said, can you get a hold of Carmichael Dave? And I said, well, he's 15 minutes by telephone.
Right. You have to go through about 17 satellites to get to me. Should also mention, since you're here, those of you watching at KHTK.com, both on your tablets, your phones, your desktops, we are brought to you by, of course, Jiffy Lube and the Sacramento Republic. We have the ball right here. Obviously, I'm not kissing ass at all by wearing my Republic gear. A true story. I do wear this often. This was not just because you were coming in.
Dave, hey, I happen to know your wife, and she said you wear three things. So I know this is just rotation day.
I'm not going to lie. I've never seen this outfit before in my life.
Shut up, Kyle.
This is brand new.
I mean, the stains don't give away anything. I think look, I know you guys were gone, but I mean, you know what? There's a thing called what they call a dishwasher.
Laundry?
Washer machine.
We have so much to talk about, Kevin. We're going to talk in this hour about the future of soccer and the future of Sacramento. One of the reasons I like having you in is because it's the old horse's mouth thing. You hear radio shows, and they're getting it from a guy, from a guy, from a guy, from a girl, from a guy. And not just when it comes to soccer, but also, let's be very clear, you're a part owner of the Sacramento Kings. You were one of the first people, along with our friend Phil Oates and many others, to step up when this city and this team was in serious trouble. And you carried that torch, obviously, over to the Republic. I want to start with a little background just for fun, since we have an hour. You are a man of wealth, but you were not born a man of wealth. If I'm correct, you were born into about as quote-unquote normal a class as possible, and then made your wealth through business as you got older and out of college. This was not a silver spoon road for you.
No, you're correct. I mean, the interesting thing about growing up, we just didn't know. I just didn't know how poor we really were. My mother was a terrific person in terms of keeping us clean, making sure that we had clothes to wear that were clean. And I mean, the reality of it is that you're shaking your head.
I'm sorry. I was trying to say very quietly to Kyle, your mic was low, and I had him turn you up.
Do you want me to talk louder?
You can talk louder.
I mean,
too.
I got up early to be here. So.
I want people to hear you. That's the thing.
All right.
So you didn't realize you guys were poor.
We just didn't. And I mean, I think there are many stories like that, quite frankly. And I mean, the only time I would know it would be time to time when people would say, "Look he's wearing old clothes, secondhand clothes." You know, the funny thing, and a lot of people have these stories. I can think, as an example, I wanted to wear Converse sneakers to school.
The Chuck Taylors?
Yes,
Yeah.
And maybe some remember, and I don't know if they're maybe really still around, Kenny's Shoe Store. Kenny's used to make a knockoff of the cool classic Converse shoe in its day.
Sure.
And what I used to do is I would go buy Kenny's shoes, which were a knockoff, a fraction, because that's what I could afford.
Right.
And then what I'd do is I'd go look for a Converse. I'd look for the logo on it and put it back where where Kenny's would have theirs. And that same thing, by the way, was true of wearing Levi jeans.
Sure.
Levi jeans were cool, and I mean, it wasn't cool to wear Lee, and which is actually a great brand
Right.
today, and some others. But I'd find them, and eventually I'd want it. You want to be known with the in crowd, because frequently I'd go to schools, unfortunately, where I was a poor kid and more of a wealth oriented school, so
Sure.
you were focused on more.
And you also, there's one story I'm semi-familiar with when you played Little League. You didn't have the money to participate in the league, so you kind of hustled your way in by what I believe was doing odd jobs, but you didn't get your entire uniform until you paid off the manager. Is that right?
Yes, it's I talk about it frequently at different places that I go to. And it's very much a true story. In fact, that person actually is Art Chapman, who was the coach of the team. Art Chapman, for many people don't know, they're part of JMA, and they're the ones that we built the Kimpton and Doko area.
Really, I didn't know that.
Yes, and so we sort of came together some 40 years later and had a conversation about what happened. And he remembers it very clearly. I saw him at Kings game last year, and we had a chance to go visit. And the story is actually, to me, it still affects me to this day. But what it is I wanted to be actually a Major League Baseball player. That's the reality.
Sure.
And I would say this much is that I tried out for the first time for organized baseball team. There were kids who had already played for many years. I was sort of coming in a few years later. You're at a disadvantage. The way I actually practiced baseball is I used to use an old softball bat that was like a 42 ounce, and here I am. I was 12 years old at the time, and I was swinging it, and I had a tennis ball that I would use as the ball that I would hit. But if you were 100 pounds and you're swinging a 42-ounce bat that's a softball bat,
heavy.
That's a lot bigger than what you probably should be at maybe 26, 27 ounces.
Sure.
So I'd go and I would use that, and I had a beat-up old glove, and that's many ways that I would practice in preparation. Well, long story short, we went through tryouts. The interesting thing is we had a lot of competition. This was in Long Beach. The team was the Long Beach Lifeguards. I'm very proud of it this day because I did make the team.
Okay.
And we had a pretty storied career for a short period of time that I was there. But what happened was the coach, when he finally made the announcements who made the team and who didn't, I was the very last guy picked. I was number, I think, 16. Mm-hmm. There were 16 players on the team. And then immediately he said, I need to collect your dues. The dues were $45. I didn't have $45.
Right.
I had odd jobs. I gave most of my money, frankly, to my mother and our family. I would usually try to keep $2.50 for me for things that I had to take care of during the week. And then what happened was the coach kept calling, hey, there's some of you guys who haven't paid up yet. And then finally he called me out. I was afraid. He called me out and he said, Nagle, he said, I need your $45 for your dues for the team. And by then I'd already come up with an idea, and I said, Coach, I don't have the $45. And I said, but what I can do is I can pay you $2.50 a week, because if the number of games that we have by the time the season ends, I will have paid that $45. I remember very vividly Coach Chapman looking down at his clipboard,
Sure.
And he had a line, I could see it had everybody's name on it, and at the very bottom it said Nagle. He told the other players, there were many others that didn't make the team. We'll say it was pretty competitive. We had a very good team. He said to stick close by, because he said there's some of these players may not make it. They may get cut. They may do something wrong. And I could see him looking at player number 17 to see who it was, to see if maybe he in fact should make that change.
Right.
So what happened was, I'm kind of going on, but you've now got me really juiced up about it. So he looked at it, and it was a sentinel moment, because at that particular point, he decided to take a risk with me, because I told him, I said, I promise you, I will be good for the money. At the same time, I'll work harder than anybody else on the team. And I really tried to stay true to that. The reality of it is, it's true. He said, okay, a deal is a deal. I will let you have the team. You're going to get a uniform, but you're not going to get a hat.
Right.
And I didn't have any cleats. So I had white tennis shoes. In the era, everybody wore black cleats.
Right.
And so what I did was I went home, and I was just excited by the fact that I could make the team, and we cut the deal with the coach. I shoe polished my shoes so that they were black, to make it look like when I was up at bat or out in the field. Those tennis shoes that I had, they were probably Kenny's.
Yeah, Kenny knockoffs.
You got
right,
it. And
right.
so or
the Converse
knockoffs.
Right.
And so it ended up that I then found a hat. I went around and I walked into garage sales. I got a hat because our team color was red on the baseball hat that had an L on it. And so I got a beat-up, old, dilapidated-looking hat from a gentleman who was nice enough to give it to me for a quarter.
Sure.
I went home. I got we cut out an L, and then washed the hat, because the hat had to be washed.
Course.
It went from red, by the way, to orange. So everybody else had red and it was orange. But and we put the L on it, stood for lifeguards. And then I sort of, in my own way, had a full team. I mean, had a full uniform
that you created. A lot of people, I'm getting a lot of texts because we kind of skipped over it too. You worked a lot of odd jobs, and you mentioned you drinking coffee with a straw.
I am, because I don't have to. I didn't think anybody was going to see us. Are people looking at us right now? Is that not cool today?
Is it a cold coffee or a hot coffee?
It's a hot coffee, but let me just say this much. I do have a plastic straw, and we asked for the plastic straw before we came in here from Starbucks.
Okay.
We give Starbucks a free plug.
Yeah, you did. What did you say, Kyle?
Keeps the teeth white.
Well, I wouldn't know anything about that, obviously. So
Same.
Okay. Yeah. Wow. I've never seen that before. Okay.
Wow.
Move on.
It's not that.
We'll get back to that later. Drinking coffee with a straw. Kevin, what were the odd jobs? Like, what kind of odd jobs?
Yeah, jobs. Name a job, I probably did it. I was a dishwasher.
Yeah. Okay.
I pumped car at a car wash, rather at a gasoline station.
Sure.
I worked as a dishwasher probably many times over.
So it was whatever was around that paid, you had time for.
Well, a lot of times I was just under 16. I was not honest
Sure.
about my age, because at the time there was an age requirement in order to work. It just didn't matter. I did what I had to do. I cut lawns. Unfortunately, they weren't with power.
Yeah, they were the ones with the
the blades that sometimes you
Right.
could even cut your feet
Right.
and everything else. I did that type. You name the job, I did it, and I think that in many ways it was good. There was a lot of humility, because where I lived at the time, the one thing my mother made us do is it wasn't in the greatest part of town, but we always had to make sure that our lawn was nice, that it was manicured, and I was the guy that had to do that. So sometimes games would start early in the morning, because the way they were, or practice, and I could not leave until I had my chores done. I'd get up at 5 in the morning sometimes,
Sure.
and because we didn't have a watering system like what we had today, it was all manual. I had to weed every day, every other day. And it's not that it was such a big lawn, but I had to get my mother's approval before leaving. I would watch my players, my team players, sometimes ride down the street because our where we actually played a lot of our games, we're just a couple of blocks away, and they'd be in their uniforms and or their practice outfits, and I'd be out there watering, and literally, I mean, I'd get up at 5 in the morning. It didn't stop me. I had paper routes, by the way. Paper routes were. That was I got really pretty good with paper routes because I leveraged my sisters into helping me increase my salary, which is sort of part of the whole idea about how to be an entrepreneur.
The beginning of your entrepreneurial future, right there.
Yeah, that and golf balls.
So what? Getting them off the driving range, or the balls that people lost? And
no, the balls that people's lost. That was that was and you learn, and I mean that was actually a lot of fun. I'd get up early, and you'd watch the hackers, or you'd go and you'd find errant golf balls, everything. A lot of smileys, obviously, but people didn't realize that. And then I got clean balls. But what happened was, I'd get golf balls on the front nine, and then what would happen as I got smarter over time is I'd go to like hole 15 when someone was on their last ball and they were going, I got 3 more holes to play. What am I going to do? And so then what I'd do is I'd sell them up. I'd say, look, you know what? Why don't you buy 2 nice balls and I'll give you a smiley. I'll throw in a smiley. Sure. So I increased my margins there, and at the same time, put more money in the pockets. And so I would do that. That was a public golf course, and if I could get on a private golf course, you really could make the money.
You can make a lot of money cleaning balls, obviously.
Yes, but I get to be pretty good with balls.
Gotcha. So you go from that to college, and you go to USC, that we know very well.
In between a few places.
Now, I'm doing this for a reason. We're building up because when I have an hour. I think it allows me to help build a narrative, and I think this narrative is fantastic because you come from nothing, and I say nothing with all respect, but you came from no money, and you hustled, and you had to do all this stuff. You get out of school, if I remember correctly, please stop me if I'm wrong. You end up in the healthcare business. You're going out, you're pounding pavement, you're working. And then you go into business for yourself. And I'm skipping a lot of things. But I'm curious, from somebody who came from nothing financially, at what point, or was there a point when I don't know if you looked at a ledger, if it was a big check, if it was a deal you cut, at what point in your life did you say, if I wanted to, I could quit my job right now? And I'd be fine, where you knew that you had, at least to some level, you had made it? What was that point in your life?
I can pretty much tell you exactly where it was.
I'll bet I would be able to too.
It was really. It was the first company that I actually started with 2 other colleagues of mine who we were co-founders.
Sure.
And it was called HMN Health Services. It's not a super cool name, but they were the initials of people who started it. And what happened was we actually were owned largely by another affiliate company.
Okay.
And the funny thing about it is they owned 55, we owned 40. We, meaning the other co-founders, we owned 45%. And the gentleman who was in charge of that, there's a deal structure called a pooling of interest, and it was the last year that you could allow it and get some tax benefits from it. And he said to me, how would you like to sell your company? And we were in it for about 23, 24 months, not a long time. It was really just getting up and ramping up.
Sure.
It was a prescription benefits management company. Had a lot of momentum that we had going at that time. And I said, Jim, you control 55% of it, so you can do what you want to do. So what we ended up doing is we pooled our company in with, he had a company, a larger company, and we ended up selling it to what is today is known as CVS.
Mm-hmm. There were pharmacies?
Yes, there were legacy companies in between to build it up eventually to become CVS. But what really happened, I guess the answer to your question is, there was a debate that was going on. Should we take cash from them or should we take stock? We decided to take all stock. It was interesting because it was what we call restricted stock. Restricted stock is something that you can't sell at the time that you receive it. There's a designated date. But what happened was after that, CVS acquired, what I know today is CVS, they acquired another very large company, and Wall Street loved it. And so they loved it to a point where the stock started to run. So literally I was watching what the sale price was originally, not being able to sell any of that stock, to over a period of time of about 4 months, it ran up literally 4 times what the share value was.
And you knew what your percentage was. You knew how much stock you had, and so I'm imagining you're doing the math. You're looking at the ledger, at the ticker, and doing the math in your head. Oh my God, this is what I started with, and this is what I have right now.
Well, I actually was on an Excel spreadsheet, and it was plugged in live, and we plugged it. I plugged it in, and I was at my house. And to your point, 2 things happened at 6 months, because we had to hold the stock for 6 months.
Right.
And then we decided we were going to start to liquidate.
Was that stressful? You're not a millionaire at this point, and you have it on paper, but waiting that 6 months before you can physically acquire the wealth. Are you freaking out like the stock's going to drop, something's going to happen, or are you itching? Was like the 6 month and 1 hour, are you there selling that stock?
Maybe a little bit, but really I'm thinking about the next deal.
Wow.
I mean, that was really the reality of it is. But I think the answer to your question is when it was finally decided we were going to start to liquidate some of the stock, because it was a feeling of many of us that stock value was going to drop at some point because there was such a massive run-up. That what happened was they said, where do you want us to ship your stock? And I had a Merrill Lynch account. There's a shout out for Merrill Lynch.
Right.
And I was sitting in my office in my home. Nobody else was in there. It was just me, and I literally watched that account go from really virtually almost no number to a massively large number.
Just
and the answer to your question was it was really I didn't jump up and down. I asked the question. I said, how different do I feel?
Yeah.
How different do I feel than what I felt 15 minutes ago? And frankly, the answer was there was maybe a little bit of sense of calming, and part of it was driven, and I think many of the listeners, maybe who are driving to work or maybe at home, maybe can relate to this. Part of it is I wanted to get off the dependency. I don't want to get kicked out of this building, by the way, either. But it was the dependency of having to rely on an employer.
Sure.
And I had come from an employer of a big Fortune 500 company in a room where one day we'd be saying everything is wonderful, and then the next minute we're laying people off. And I did not want the reason why I left corporate America was for that reason. Is the reality of it is we couldn't be really truthful to all of our employees, and the other part was at the same time you wanted to have control of your own destiny, and I wanted to have control of it.
And what year was this? About
2000, right before 9/11.
Okay, so right around 2000, 2001.
Yes.
That's a good time to break. When we come back, we'll bring you up to this point. I know there was a couple other little projects between then and now, and by little project I'm being facetious, massive projects, and then why you got into sports, why you got into soccer, and where we stand right now. And my question I always ask you, which is, why aren't you on a desert island somewhere with a cup of coffee with a straw in it, being waited on and fed grapes? It's the difference between guys like you and peasants like me, and that whole drive thing that I'm always fascinated with.
We'll get you some new clothes, Dave.
I appreciate that. You know a guy with a connection?
Yeah, that's we're gonna have to take that stain away though.
We'll take a break. Kevin Nagle with us until 9 a.m. right here on Sports 1140 KHTK.
Hey, this is Kyle Madsen with your top stories on Sports 1140. The Sacramento Kings are finally back in action tonight. They are home to host the Atlanta Hawks at the Golden One Center. Our coverage on Sports 1140 begins with game night at 5:30. Kings Live is at 6:30, and then tip-off with the G-Man is set for 7 o'clock. It's 8:32. Plan now to watch the big game at Sammy's Restaurant, the best food and drink inside Stone's Gambling Hall, I-80 at Antelope Road. Those are your top stories. Now back to the drive on Sports 1140 KHTK.
The drive continues now.
Continuing along on the Sporty 1140, broadcast on KHTK.com, brought to you by our good friends at the Sacramento Republic and the lead investor, the honcho, the mustachioed one, Kevin Nagle, in studio with us right now. You still you okay to hang with us till 9?
I'm good. Bring them on. Bring the questions on, Dave. Bring them on.
All right. So we were just doing a little bit of history, and there's a point to this. We got up to the year 2000, 2001 when you had started to make it, but there's a difference between money and real money, and that takes us into, I believe it was Envision, your company that you sold. How many years ago has it been now? 4 or 5 that you sold?
3.5.
3.5. And that's when you start selling things with B's instead of M's attached to it. And you've gotten to a point now where you got to a point then where you were done. If you wanted, you were done, and your lovely daughters, your family, everything taken care of. But then in 2012-ish, 2013, the Maloofs announced that they had a deal with the Hansen Group and the Nordstrom brothers and Steve Ballmer of Microsoft to take the team to Seattle. And I'm assuming at some point along the way you get a call from then Mayor Kevin Johnson. What was it that made you decide, hey, I'm going to not only write a check, but get very deeply involved in this process? Why even deal with that?
Why not? Really, the answer is, and it's actually, there's a funny story. I mean, it seems like we tell a lot of anecdotal stories, but I actually was a Laker. You know, having come from Los Angeles and migrated up to Northern California, I really learned to love the Kings in a relatively short period of time. I've told this story many times where a very good friend of mine who was from Los Angeles, he said, you got to come up and see this great place in Sacramento. It was El Dorado Hills. There was nothing out there at the time.
Yep.
And I kind of laughed at him, and he lived 5 or 6 doors down, and he said, "You're gonna," and it was really funny. We said goodbye to him and his family, and he knocked on the door at 1 a.m. And he one last time, and I looked out, I could see, even though it was dark, it looked like the Beverly Hillbillies hat, or rather their car.
Right.
And he shook his hand. He said, "I'm going to see you in 6 months." And it was really funny. My good friend who's here today in the area, Bob Levine. So Bob shakes my hand and says, "I'm going to see you up in the Sacramento area in 6 months." I laughed.
Right.
You know, I had a big corporate job. The reality of it is that I did end up here 6 months later. While I was up here, he said, "You have to come to a Kings game," because he and I had been to some Laker games together.
Mm-hmm. And this was around what year?
This was 1994.
Okay.
And now you're starting to date me.
Right. Yes, I am.
I went to one Kings game. It had such an impact. And part of it is, you know, if you spent your time at an LA Lakers game, you know, showtime, and it was we knew we were going to win. It was just a question of when during the game. I mean, if we're behind by 8 or 15, whatever it is, you know, we just had so much firepower. I remember coming up to what was Arco Arena then. My first game, sat fairly down fairly close, and I watched how hard these players played, and I also just was incredibly impressed by the fan base. I'd never really experienced that.
Sure.
I mean, I could feel it. And so ironically, not that many years later, I used to listen in the morning. I'd listen to when Jerry Reynolds would have, I think he had a show called Reynolds Rap.
Yep.
And I think Jeff Petrie, as a GM, would come on. Maybe it was even the station here. I don't know which one it was. But I used to listen to those. So I had this pretty quick transformation from really being a Lakers fan, a diehard Lakers fan, which there are many even up here.
We'll forgive you.
To a Kings, to becoming a Kings fan. And then now fast forward. So now this crisis occurs. And what was really sort of another funny story, and I mean, we could just tell stories that go on, and maybe the audience gets bored with it. But
I don't think so.
No, what happened was I saw what happened, and what happened with what the mayor did was he didn't realize, that my company, Envision RX, it was as large as it was. It was really one of the largest companies in the whole region.
You guys were handling prescription stuff for what, like the big box, like Costco, Walmart. I mean, you were into some pretty damn.
Well, we had big clients. We had health plans as clients. A lot of
Yeah.
people don't recognize that when they go to their insurance company, it was companies like mine that
Right.
actually do all the work behind the
Sure.
scenes. They just think it's the insurance company. It's really a company like Envision RX, and we were doing a lot of business in the area, but people just didn't know it because it tends to be a quiet component of healthcare. And the reality of it was we were a multi-billion-dollar company.
Yep.
And I was a CEO. I had 3 offices, although I spent most of it in El Dorado Hills, but we had one in Cleveland, outside of Cleveland and elsewhere. But where we had, by the way, and also Fort Lauderdale, and in all 3 locations, we had NBA suites. So what happened was, when I heard this, I called a guy named Matt Mahood. Matt, at the time, I think was the chamber. He was a chamber president.
I think so.
Who was leading up part of the process. And so I was actually, at the time, I was in Cleveland, and I wanted to say, I want to help you. And what happened was, Matt got on the phone, and he said to me, look, I don't know who you are. He said, but I don't really need any $5 investments. Because remember, there was a movement, the grassroots, to get anybody who had money to support the Kings.
Yes.
And I said, well, I can assure you, I don't want to waste your time either, but I can assure you.
Yeah, we're talking dollars.
Yeah, that $5. And he goes, well, I don't know who you are. And then all of a sudden what happened was, he turned it over. I think what he said is, there's some crazy guys that, want it. And he said, here's the name. All of a sudden I get a call from Mayor KJ, and the rest is history. I mean, he obviously did their diligence,
right,
and then realized we had a large company, that we were sort of flying under the radar in the region, and then I got engaged.
Well, we know the story there as far as the team.
To the team, by the way.
Yes, to be very clear about that. You got engaged to the Sacramento Kings, who you're still with to this day, by the way. Congratulations. So in addition to that, we fast forward. You take over the Republic from Warren Smith and that group, and you and a number of locals here that made up your ownership group. And that's what we'll get into the next segment, because this is a good time to take our final break. In the next segment, the hour's flying, Kevin, because we could have already gone like another hour just on that last segment alone.
Well, I can't wait to hear what I say next. So, I mean, we just keep talking. We can keep talking, and there'll be one person listening at the other end, and I'll just keep going.
We can just cut the broadcast and keep you here till 11 a.m. When you come back, I want to talk about the frustrations over the last year or so, the quest for MLS, and how badly, and I had the opportunity to actually talk to you through a lot of this, how badly you wanted to scream from the rooftops what was going on, where you were, what you were doing, and then we'll talk a little bit about what's next, not just for the team, but the city as well. And we're going to try to pull that off in about a 10-minute segment. That's going to seem like it's 2. So Kevin Nagle is in studio. We're going to wrap things up in our final segment next and talk about the future of the team, the future of the city, and everything that's been going on over the last year right here on Sports 1140 KHTK. Studio, Kevin Nagle, final segment with he. So nice of him to come in. Thank you, Kevin, by the way, for making the drive down here from the Ivory Tower in El Dorado Hills and coming down and hanging out with me in my world.
It's been a beautiful experience so far, Dave.
I want to take the fifth caller right now at 339-1140, 1-800-912-1140. Pair of tickets to see the Kings and Hawks tonight, Golden One Center, the return from the 6-game road trip. We're all very excited about that. More info at khtk.com. But, hey, get in there right now. Fifth caller. Kevin, we got to cover a lot of stuff in a very short amount of time, and that's what happens when time flies and two old friends are BSing on the radio. Why did you decide to get involved in the Republic and take us through that process and how you got through all that? Because you weren't like Mr. Soccer guy. Yeah,
I still don't know a great deal about soccer. I mean, you're always a student. I mean, it's one of the great sports of the world. The reality of it is really soccer is a lot bigger than soccer itself. It's really about the transformation of Sacramento.
Sure.
Sacramento from 1994 when I arrived here to today is changed amazingly, and our last couple of mayors have just had a profound impact with many of my friends who are in the business community. And when Warren Smith came up with the whole idea, and I think actually Joe
Wagner,
yes, those two guys came up with a fantastic idea. There might have been some other people involved.
Sure.
I think that, and I don't want to not.
Yeah, no,
think
of course
help.
there were.
But the reality of it is they came up with a fantastic idea. I saw the first few games where 21,000 people were showing up. I knew that we had something real here, and I wanted to engage and get involved with it in some point. But I knew, regardless, we needed to be at least a two-sport major league city, number one. And number two, though, I also knew it would be changing Sacramento as it moved, from where it looked like nationally to now being profiled as really one of the more desired cities to come to in the United States.
You become the lead investor for the Republic. You're trying to get the team to become a Major League Soccer franchise. We all remember Commissioner Garber out here saying it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. We were downtown. But then it develops into trips to New York, ins and outs, a lot of stuff we can't talk about, a lot of stuff that's already been put out there in the media. But over the last, it seems like forever, even though it's probably been a year plus, you had developed a new, we talked about your background and the work you've done, but you developed a new vocation, which was fisherman. You learned how to bait hooks. I don't know, you catch whales with hooks, I guess harpoons, but you were going whale hunting for many, many, many months. How frustrating, or was that process frustrating to you? And how much of a relief is it to finally be at a point where you can say you caught yourself a pretty big whale?
Yeah, let me just say this much. In 2014, 15, when there was actually the thought of making the Sac Republic a major league expansion team.
Sure.
And looking at the financial profile, there's no question someone like me, along with my limited partner investors, we could have pulled this whole thing off because the cost of the structure at that time was very different. The expansion fee was half of what it was.
Right.
To build the stadium was substantially less. The working capital was substantially less. So that was one part. So, but then what happened was the sport just exploded. And, you started to see, some of the top players from around the world that they wanted to start to come to the United States and play. We had, and you call it designated players. We had also just the whole, just the whole idea of the cost of the business started to go up because of expansion and success. And so we knew that we were going to have to. We knew that we were going to have to take on some additional people to make it work. And we actually thought we had one. And I will tell you the story, and I will tell it at some point because I'm dying to tell it when we appropriately can for legal reasons.
Right, of course.
But we really had we had all three, what we refer to are the three very important components. One is incredible fan base, incredible stadium profiling, and then our development, and then the same thing. We had the ownership group, and we were the odds-on favorite. There's no question about that. But what happened was we thought we had a whale. That whale didn't work out.
Sure.
That's a story for another day.
Sure.
People will be very interested in it. So literally, we went in making our presentation into New York with about 48 hours to try to figure out how are we going to look credible, which we could. It just meant that we didn't have the depth because the reality of it is the sport had grown so much that the commissioner and everyone involved, you were going to need a lot of investment in the future.
Right.
Just like other sports. And so we had to demonstrate that. We had frankly a hard time demonstrating we'd be able to do that long term.
Yeah.
I think we could get through the short term, but you need a lot of capital if you're going to be. Just look to see who owns teams, Major League Soccer today. They're all the same. Many of them are the same. Football, basketball.
Right. It's a billionaires club.
It is.
Yeah.
It is, along with a lot of private equity in there, which means
Right.
a lot of capital. So we went to go this past year. We went to go search we had many people that we were focusing on. I knew we weren't going to spend a lot of time really, talking a lot about how great the team was and everything. Although we've got a great organization that's in place, turnkey right now, to be competitive in Major League Soccer. But the reality of it is we had about 4 or 5 whales that we looked at. I got to know Ron through, actually just met him a few times through some various functions, and eventually introduced to me, and we hit it off. And some people picked it up. I think the press picked it up. They saw us at a Kings game, and that was, where we had some discussions. I had a great first meeting on the subject, and then over the course of the next several months, we sort of consummated that. But in between, we had other people. There were a lot of rumors, frankly, I can tell you, about who were the whales.
Sure.
We had great people who would be part of our ownership group, like Meg Whitman, wonderful people. I loved them, but they were never whales.
You had a lot of people that thought they knew a lot of what they were talking about.
Yes, and the press reported it as that. No, it just wasn't true. We just didn't want to go back and correct them. But
you didn't want to give it credence.
Yes, I mean, there's that word today that a couple people call it, what is it, fake news? I don't really use it, but I don't want to use it anymore.
Sure.
But it just wasn't accurate. And the reality of it is we had some really good people who had substantial means. It was just a natural that Ron be the one.
You wanted the right fit. It wasn't just about writing a check. You had a responsibility as a caretaker, kind of in a way, for the city, and I'm putting words in your mouth here, to not just it wasn't just about here's a check. It was about having an interest in Sacramento. You had familiarity a little bit with Ron through his dabblings with the Kings early on. You were familiar with him, and it sounds to me like you guys were just doing due diligence and making sure you had the right fit, not just a checkbook.
We did, and the one thing, in my meetings with Ron, first of all, even though he's a whale of different proportion, we had a lot of the same type of stories. And It was one of the things that he was a wrestler. I was a wrestler. And I asked him, I said, were you any good? And he goes, not really. And I said, well, maybe that was one thing I'm better than Ron at.
You guys never threw on the singlets and went at it in the middle of the meeting?
No, you never do that when you're trying. It's sort of like the person who's your boss that you go play tennis with.
Right.
And you always make sure they or golf, they barely win in the end. But I would say this much.
Sure.
Everything, Ron is just in many ways just such a regular person in my mind. He's very humble. He's got a great story of how he built his empire.
Self-made.
I just so much relate to that.
Yeah.
I think he felt the same way about me. The other part, he knew Sacramento. He loved Sacramento. He almost became the managing partner with the Kings, which would have been fantastic.
Sure.
But those conflicts that he had with owning his
Sports
agency that prevented him from that. But he did not have that issue. And I mean, everyone who owns a team within Major League Soccer knows Ron Burkle. Just does a fantastic job with the Penguins. Won a couple of Stanley Cups.
Yeah. And
at the same time built a fantastic arena. Knew how to put all the pieces of the puzzle. It was the right fit. And we had some great people. We haven't announced them yet. Maybe in time we'll bring up some of the people that we talked about, because
sure.
I was on, as you know, I didn't spend a lot of time on social media, but at the same time I started to finally respond to some people privately, and people were and I don't blame them. They were starting to feel like they could give up, and I didn't want them to give up because I knew how close we were. I just couldn't say it.
Very frustrating. Over the last year plus, you had people, what are these guys doing? Are they sitting on their ass? Are they fiddling up the whole deal? And I would imagine you very much, as we wrap up here, you very much wanted to scream from the rooftops, listen, we're meeting every day and we can't disclose any of this, but you couldn't. And now it must feel finally good to be able to say, not in a yeah way, but guys, we've been working our asses off for the last year, and this is the result of that. We got it. We got that part of it done.
Two things. One is we wanted to make sure that we had a highly competitive team that people could continue to enjoy as a Republic. And really, we had Todd Donovan.
Yeah.
We had Ben Gumpert. Who was the president. We made him the president. Those guys were working on that, and then really, I also had a sort of my right-hand person, Ben.
Sure.
And we worked this whole process. But you're right. The other side was to work the process get the diligence done in the city, get the mayor engaged, and make sure that it was a reality. We're here. We're going to get this thing done one way or another.
Over the next few weeks, few months, there will be more news that comes out, and obviously no specifics here other than meetings will happen, things will be said. Overall, I'll ask you this very simple question as we are out of time, Kevin. In your opinion, are we in a better place than we have been to date when it comes to eventually realizing that MLS dream?
Loaded question, it seems like. Is that a softball? The answer is we are at a much, much better. Any of those naysayers, don't give up. I can just tell you right now, I feel very good about where we are.
See how nice you are? I'll tell those naysayers, hey, shut up. Get on board. Get on board the train because it's going somewhere, and these guys are working their tails off to get it done. You're very nice. You're very humble. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Dave.
Anything else you want to...
No, I want to say this much. I just really appreciate our fans. This last year, look, I think they felt the last, few years we were going to get the nod. I feel their pain. In fact, in many ways, I would say I feel more of it than they do because the reality, I lived through it every single day.
Sure.
But I'm glad they've hung with us. We're going to have a great season for them as a USL team on our journey, what I believe is going to be a major league expansion team this year.
I can think of about 40 million reasons why I believe you. For Kevin Nagle in studio, Kyle Madsen, Eunice behind the glass, Cam DeSilva of Rams Wire, everybody hanging out. Thank you so much. Hope you enjoyed this final hour, and that will be available at KHTK.com and on the KHTK app. Jim Rome is next. We'll see you tomorrow at 6 a.m. Enjoy the rest of your broadcast day on Sports 1140 KHTK. Bye-bye now.